Good afternoon, everybody, at least from the Benelux side. Hopefully you can hear me correctly.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So today we have our second webinar, Computer Software Assurance, CSA, and we will start right now. I hope everybody has participated who has also submitted today. As you know, the GAMP COP, Benelux, is a community of practice, and we share our knowledge together with each other and also interacting with the peers. You can find us in the ifp.org calendar. You can find anyway all the events that the ISP organize, even the separate COPs, into this calendar. So it's very interesting. While most of the COPs currently are presenting, of course, webinars, you can also attend webinars worldwide. So that's perhaps a suggestion for you. Also, you can find us on the LinkedIn site, and you can find us for our own events on www.ispe/events.eu. So for this webinar, please keep your microphone muted. You can put on your video if you like, but please microphone unmuted. Later on, of course, we go to sessions, and then you need to put on your microphone, of course. But you will be instructed on that one. Furthermore, this webinar is being recorded, so be aware of that. I will give you a note when the webinar recording is stopped. So hopefully you will enjoy our webinar. This is the agenda we have. We start with the welcome. Well, we currently did already. Then we have a presentation by Sean Wine, and that's mostly about what CSA is. In fact, the FDA submitted a guideline, but also we draw it already. So it's very interesting to know what, of course, the topic is anyway, and what the future will bring us, because it's the way the FDA is thinking. Then we have a small presentation on risk-based testing by Frans Boeien and Bart de Groot. And this will include also afterwards an inactive discussion and session for how to risk-based testing. And therefore you got already a link in your invitation in relation to micro.com. So hopefully you all will participate, of course, in this action webinars. Then we will have a close-up wrap-up meeting. Of course, Frans and Bart de Groot need some time to prepare that, but we will come back on that later on. And then finally, we hope to end around 16:30. So now I will give the word to Sean about the subject, what CSA. Sean, you can take over.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marcel, for the kind invitation. And thanks very much to GAMP Benelux, GAMP COP. And congratulations for all your activities and everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
I will request I think the request for control was not accepted, so I'm not sure. So do I just need to open the tray, perhaps? Oh yes, so it looks as though I might be okay now.
Yes, you can put it on presentation, please.
Great, thank you very much. So yes, the topics today are the FDA Case for Quality initiative, in particular those aspects to do with computer software assurance, and of course, very importantly, the relationship with the GAMP worldwide initiative. So I'll start off with giving you a little bit of background on the FDA Centre for Drug Devices and Radiological Health Case for Quality initiative, because I think knowing the background is important, and then say some words about this idea of computer systems assurance, this phrase that is being mentioned a lot, and then finish off with some current industry challenges, which I think are very closely related to what the FDA themselves have spotted. Now, the FDA CDRH launched the Case for Quality program a few years ago, following a careful review of data and feedback from both FDA and industry stakeholders. And they, during their careful analysis, identified widespread and common manufacturing risks that impact product quality. And one of the core program components to do with this is the focus on quality initiative. Although the FDA have traditionally focused on evaluating a manufacturer's compliance with regulations governing design and production of devices, the focus on quality initiative goes further than this by treating compliance as a baseline and then looking for the inclusion of critical to quality practices that result in higher quality outcomes. And they've also put a focus on the maturity of organizations rather than just a baseline regulatory compliance. They've realized that an excessive focus on compliance can divert resources and attention away from where it could really help quality, i.e. investments in technology and other modern techniques. So focusing too much on documentation, which doesn't directly lead to improved quality outcomes, that was being seen. So the industry focus was seen to be meeting regulatory compliance requirements and producing documentation rather than understanding and adopting good quality practices. And this trend, they felt, was also related to low investment in automation and digital technologies, which they felt could very much assist in quality improvements and better process control. And as a part of this Case for Quality program, and you can find a lot of information on the FDA website on the overall program, but as part of this, they've indicated that they plan to release a draft guidance on this topic of computer systems assurance. The full title, as we'll hear, Computer Software Assurance for Manufacturing Operations and Quality System Software. So the Case for Quality program, the wider initiative, is trying to adopt a risk-based, product quality focus and patient-centric approach overall, including taking such an approach to computerized systems. Now, obviously, GAMP strongly supports this approach because that's what we are all about. It's being risk-based, product quality focused, and patient-centric, encouraging critical thinking based on product and process knowledge and proper quality risk management control approaches rather than prescriptive tick in the box documentation driven approaches. So the Case for Quality is focusing on quality over compliance. It's encouraging innovation, automation, and tools, and trying not to put barriers in the way of companies like regulatory barriers or inspection barriers, or cause fear or problems in companies such that they would be discouraged from using automation and tools in the quality system in general, and specifically to do with computerized system life cycles. And this is where the draft guidance or planned draft guidance comes in. Well, one of the reason, as I mentioned, that manufacturers didn't seem to be seeking quality improvements by adopting automation was this compliance burden and regulatory risk. They were telling the FDA, well, if we go out and find new innovative technologies, then we have to spend an awful lot of time and money unnecessarily validating these. And then you come along and if you find something that you're unhappy with during an inspection, it's a regulatory risk for us. So these factors were seen to be a barrier to the adoption, and the FDA were hearing things like the cost of validation being reported as twice the cost of the basic system, which is definitely not what the FDA wanted to achieve. And as you can see here from this statement by the then FDA Commissioner, Scott Gottlieb. So not only did a compliance-centric approach stop innovation, but it was also seen to cause quality issues because the companies weren't focused on the real quality of the product. They were just focusing on passing inspections. And in the area of computerized systems, in particular, the FDA decided that this perceived and, in their opinion, unfair and unwarranted regulatory burden has contributed to outdated compliance practices. So they were seeing practices that they regarded as outdated and unnecessary. So they are advocating critical thinking and risk-based approaches where appropriate, agile approaches of incremental and iterative development rather than the traditional old-fashioned focus on documentation and compliance. So as Cisco Vincenti, who is the Case for Quality Program Manager, very clearly said it, moving away from formal validation, verification, and documentation and moving towards systems that meet our needs, systems that are fit for intended use, especially with regards to requirements around product quality and safety and quality system integrity. They identified that systems can be very high impact, but many systems are actually pretty low impact in terms of product quality and patient safety. And certainly low risk systems should get far less efforts for validation and documentation, and the regulated company should select the least burdensome possible. They shouldn't be just doing more for the sake of it. They should be achieving a level of assurance that fits in their company objectives using a least burdensome approach. And this may very often involve leveraging supplier activities, supplier information, and other existing information wherever possible. The FDA believe that the current regulations, and we're particularly talking about 820 here, but I don't think there's anything different if we think about 210, 211. Current regulations already, in the FDA's opinion, allow such a value and risk-based approach, so they don't need to change the regulations. They just need to explain how they understand the regulation and how the industry could interpret the regulation and how they would act during inspections. So for instance, the FDA will focus regulatory activity on inspection and review of systems that impact quality or safety, because there are systems that do have a high or direct, depending on what types of words you like to use, high impact on quality and safety, and they are the ones that will get the focus during inspections. Now, the corollary of this, of course, is that the FDA does not intend to focus regulatory resources on inspection and review of assurance activities related to systems with little or no direct impact on product quality and safety. And as an industry, we have been guilty over many years of pumping an awful lot of effort and resource into the formal documentation and validation of systems that have little or no direct impact on product quality and safety. And why we're doing this? Because we believe that the FDA will find fault during inspections. But in the Case for Quality initiative, they've stated they don't intend to focus regulatory resources on these systems of lower impact. And when we get to the use of tools for computerized system life cycles, computerized system management, computerized system testing, etc., they are encouraged as being an effective and efficient way of getting computerized systems that are fit for intended use. And these will not be the focus of FDA inspection. And this fits in very well with the GAMP approach of regarding these tools, for instance, as category 1, neither GXP nor non-GXP. So this computer software assurance guidance is on the list of proposed guidances for fiscal year 2021. It's on the A list as a draft guidance topic. So if and when it's published, it will still be in draft, and I, for one, have not seen such a draft. So any comments I may have, any statements, any interpretation should be taken, bearing in mind that they haven't actually published this document yet. However, the GAMP community have been working quite closely with the FDA industry team, working as a part of Case for Quality on this topic of CSA. And one of the outputs, one of the fruits of that working together is in an appendix called S2 Computer Software Assurance, which is included in the GAMP Records and Data Integrity Good Practice Guide on data integrity by design. So we put a lot of effort in working on this appendix to both show the CSA's team's views and expectations, while also putting it in the context of GAMP good practice. And I think we've done that successfully. So what do we mean when we talk about computer software assurance, or what's been said? What is this all about? And as I said, this is my personal understanding and interpretation, given the lack of a published draft. Then one of the points that's being made in conferences, for instance, is the big difference in the regulations between product and process validation on one hand, and the validation of computerized systems supporting those processes on the other. And sometimes the term non-product CSV is used to reflect that. The FDA feel that the industry have tried to apply product and process validation directly to computerized systems. This was never intended in the regulation. So they want, I believe, to clarify this. Second point, the acceptability and potential advantages of iterative, incremental, and exploratory, that we can sum up and just call agile approaches to software development. Now, this won't be news to any of you who are really involved in software development, because over the last few decades, the acceptability and the advantages of agile approaches have been well understood and applied. But there's been a resistance in the GXP area sometimes because of a misunderstanding that this is in some way against GXP principles. Thirdly, that the application of the most appropriate testing approaches through the life cycle is important, with the primary aim of getting systems that work. We want systems that are fit for intended use. We don't want to produce lots and lots of paperwork. We want systems that work. We want to remove the defects from these systems, and we want to verify that our risk management controls are working. So this is the focus of our testing approaches, rather than having a focus on traditional and formal test documentation. And as I mentioned previously, encouraging the use of software lifecycle management tools, automation, and infrastructure management tools and automation, because these are the most effective ways of implementing and managing systems that are fit for intended use. And again, as I briefly mentioned, clarify that CDRH inspection focus will be on systems with a clear and direct impact on product quality and patient safety. Other supporting systems used as part of production or the quality system should be managed by normal company assurance approaches, and tools and systems supporting system life cycles, IT processes, and non-product CSV would not be subject to inspection, because an awful lot of effort is being expended in the industry preparing these kinds of tools for inspections unnecessarily. And this is very much aligned with GAMP thinking and the GAMP approach. We strongly support this patient-centric and quality risk-based view. We believe that current ISPE GAMP guidance is already fully aligned and consistent with such an approach. In particular, we support the adoption of new and innovative computerized technologies and approaches throughout the product lifecycle. So realistically, if we're asking the question, what is the difference between GAMP and CSA? Well, my honest answer would be none, because you can apply a CSA approach and you can apply the current GAMP good practice, and they would be identical. There's nothing really fundamentally different, and we'll see in a minute when we look at the GAMP key concepts why this is the case. So if we can meet CSA by applying GAMP good practice and vice versa, well, what's the big deal? Well, one of the big deals is that one of the obstacles to properly applying GAMP is a perceived and unwarranted fear of regulatory inflexibility, to use a phrase that's directly from the US FDA. So often you hear, yes, this would be a good approach, wouldn't it? But the FDA won't allow it. Or yes, we can do this, but we are afraid of inspection, so we're going to follow our traditional old-fashioned approach. So the big deal here is that these myths and rumors that a patient-centric and risk-based approaches are okay, that the industries are pushing them, but they are in some way rejected by the FDA. But here we have the FDA very strongly pushing these concepts, and rightly so. So just a reminder, I'm sure most of you will be extremely well aware of this diagram. These are the GAMP 5 key concepts, and we see there the user company, the regulated company, and the supplier both involved. The regulated company needs to understand their product, how that product impacts the patient, and they need to understand how their processes can deliver good product. Then they need a scalable life cycle approach that's inbuilt into their pharmaceutical quality system, and that needs to be scalable, and at the heart of it needs proper quality risk management. as per ICH 9 or 14971 if you're dealing with medical devices. And we've got the opportunity to leverage supplier involvement throughout these activities. So basically, the GAMP key concepts and the public statements on the case for quality and CSA are saying the same thing. Just to finish off very briefly, and I realize I'm running out of time, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but one of the problems I see is a confusion in companies between quality and compliance. And this was one of the main messages from the FDA, which led them on to this focus on quality initiative. So companies are focusing on internal compliance audits and inspections versus real product quality and patient safety. And that's also supported or made worse or exacerbated by a general misunderstanding. I still see a lot of misunderstanding and over-interpretation of regulations and guidance. And to use that FDA phrase again, lack of critical thinking driven by perceived and unwarranted fear of regulatory inflexibility. Tick in the box risk management which isn't really truly focused towards identifying and managing risk. And it's true with tick in the box validation and table driven approaches as well. And the whole big area of inappropriate application of pure GXP concepts to non-product related areas. But that's a topic for another day. But again, it chimes very well with what the FDA have been saying. So in conclusion, the FDA Case for Quality program, which includes this CSA element, promotes a risk-based, product quality focused and patient-centric approach to computerized systems. The GAMP Global Steering Committee strongly supports this approach. We strongly encourage critical thinking based on product and process knowledge and true quality risk management over prescriptive documentation-driven approaches. So that's almost a re-summary there of the GAMP key concepts and showing how they tie in very well with the statements of FDA CDIH. So thanks again, Marcel. Thanks to all the Benelux GAMP COP for the invitation to talk, and congratulations on your ongoing very active and enthusiastic work. Thank you.
Thank you also, John. Perfect presentation. I think we know now that GAMP is still current, although a lot of people are questioning if the GAMP 5 doesn't need an update, but it's still current, so we can still use it even in the new approach of the FDA. We do have some questions for you, so I will mention. It was regarding the slide number 10. The FDA has no focus on tooling. This means the tool still needs to be qualified or validated. Or is an informal statement like tool is properly tested sufficient? ?
I think one way of answering that would be, well, certainly we can follow GAMP guidance and we can say, right, okay, well, we need the infrastructure to be qualified. What does that mean? But I think we can use Annex 11 as a good pointer here. So, let's say software testing tools should have a documented assessment of their appropriateness, or if I remember exactly the words. But the tools we use need to truly support the processes. So if we have decided on a testing process, then we need to use the right tool. We need to install it properly, use it properly, and our personnel needs to understand how to use it. But exactly, and I would definitely avoid the word validation, but it's appropriateness for intended use. The process is the thing. Great, thank you.
So another question, do you know if it's only USA, so FDA, or is it also that the European Union, so the EMA, is thinking in the same way and will be publishing draft guidance about CSA?
I believe that this initiative is purely part of the CDRH Case for Quality program. I do not know of any equivalent initiative in the European space. Now, that doesn't mean that European regulators aren't perhaps always, and rightly so, looking to see whether they need to update regulations, update guidance, etc. But I know of no immediately. I don't know of any initiatives which are aimed in this area.
Yeah. But still, if we follow GAMP, we can ensure that CSA is included. So, in fact, we're talking about the same.
Exactly, and if your prime focus is on the European market, then I believe that meeting Annex 11 by following GAMP 5 shouldn't be any different to if you are also focused on the USA market, and so basically, if you're following GAMP 5 and Annex 11, there's nothing to stop you doing all of this anyway.
Yeah. So I take a last question. So it's about GLP. If you know if the GLP authorities from Europe and FDA are also looking into CSA / of course GAMP. In the US, FDA is responsible for GMP and GLP. In Europe, of course, it can be different organizations. So that's the question.
Right. Honestly, I don't know for GLP. I do believe that in the European region, then even though Annex 11 is a GMP regulation strictly, it's adopted by other GXP areas. So I would say that if you're looking at it from a European perspective, I would say assume that Annex 11 is a GXP expectation, so apply it in the GLP area. As to what the GLP people within FDA are doing, I don't have any information, and I'd rather say that I don't know rather than give you a viewpoint which was based on very little information.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Then we will go to the presentation. We do have more questions. Perhaps we can send you, and perhaps you can answer them, and we can collect them and put them on our website. That's perhaps a proposal I would like to make.
Okay.
Because otherwise we are running out of time.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much anyway. And we are now going to the presentation of Frans Boeien and Bart de Grote about risk-based testing. And then we will continue with the webinar. Frans, Bart, can I give you the presentation?
Yes, good afternoon. I hope the screen is visible and you can hear me, Marcel.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay. Welcome. Thank you, Sean, for the perfect introduction to the second presentation, where we continue. Both Bart and I will join this, have a joint presentation about risk-based testing based on CSA. And it's all based within the presentation. We go into more detail on that Appendix S2 of the Good Practice Guide on Data Integrity by Design, because we have to answer a very important question: what is needed to be confident that the system is indeed fit for intended use and meets the regulated company's needs. So it's, as Sean mentioned, not the need of the inspector, but it's what your company needs to prove that the system is fit for intended use. So CSA wants to answer this question with an approach that is based on critical thinking. Critical thinking, the basis of CSA, is the analysis of facts to form a judgment. And generally, this includes that you have to be skeptical, critical, you have to question every fact to check whether your decision that you make is indeed based on facts. And your decision is about measures you have to take. And one of those measures we are going into more detail during this session is the testing activities. Testing activities is one of the measures that we have to decide on what is really needed. Those testing activities, of course, will build documentation, but documentation gets less important within CSA. But still, we do need some documented evidence. Well, some people were asking, what is critical thinking? Well, you can read here again what I said, and it has to do with also being self-monitoring, self-disciplined, self-corrective thinking. But I truly believe it is a competence that can and has to be developed by everybody working within the company. It's an essential competence for quality personnel. I think you cannot work in quality if you are not a critical thinker. So whenever you are working in quality, it is something you have to work on and to develop on. The question we are raising during this session is, can we improve testing efficiency by applying critical thinking? And I hope we can get an answer to this during this session with your help, because later on we are going to do a brainstorm session.
So, thank you, Frans, for introducing this question. If we have a deeper dive into this question, we can see that we need to focus on data integrity, I think, because we're talking about software. So data integrity is important. An increased level of data integrity will for sure make sorry, I just lost my will lead to more patient safety and also a better product quality. Besides of that, we want more effective testing. So we want to test and to look if there are issues or errors in our features or in our system. Therefore, we really need to know what we test and how we will test it. Next to that, we also want to prevent deviations in the field or of the tester or test script errors. So it means we want to find the errors in the application, in the software, but we don't want to document errors produced by the tester or due to the test script error. Because of this all, we also want to lower documentation effort. How do we want to do that? Make that our documentation effort is related to the risk of the features and functions that are in our software package. If we make the combination of the right focus on data integrity, also a more effective testing, so we know what we are testing, which features we want to test. It's important to increase our test speed. If we go over to the GAMP 5, so Sian and Frans already mentioned the GAMP GPG data integrity by design, but if we have a look into the GAMP 5 Appendix 5, we can see, we can read that we should use an appropriate test strategy based on the risk complexity and the novelty of the system. And it goes without saying that a new and complex system needs more effort. And this is also in line with the general principles of software validation. So it must be in line with the risk proposed by the automated operation. If we speak about an ineffective validation approach, you all will see or recognize following points. We will spend an enormous amount of time generating detailed and prescriptive test scripts. We also will put too much emphasis on gathering supporting evidence, such as screenshots, If you all know, in the past, screenshots were a really important thing. But today, with a lot of tools that you can find online, you can change those screenshots you have taken. So I think in the future, a screenshot will lose a part of his evidence. It will be harder to show with a screenshot that you finalized what you want to do. Also, you do a lot of dry running just to test your test script and to reduce execution errors, also to reduce the amount of tester errors. And because of this, we really focus on an error-free script execution. And instead of that, we should focus on finding the errors in the features of the application. I think that's very important we have to do.
Yes, I fully agree on that, Bart. And that's where the focus of CSA comes in, to do more active testing to find defects. We should spend less time generating specs in advance for testing. Most of the time, those specs are already defined within all kind of functional design or module design documents already. So make use of that instead of copying them into testing specs. Also, the supporting evidence, as you mentioned, by a lot of screenshots, only where it brings value. This is important. So if it does not bring value to your company, why do you do it? Don't make that evidence only for an inspection. It has to be of value for your own purpose, for your company. And that's where you really have to apply critical thinking by experienced people, experienced subject matter experts who really understand the process, understand the product, to determine the test cases and direction to go. And that should all be based on a documented risk assessment. A documented risk assessment, I think, is essential here and is the underlying evidence why you do your testing. And we can make use of that. And as Sean already mentioned, there are many systems with low impact. There are many aspects that lower the risk. We see a lot of commercial off the shelf and configuration versus customization. Customization is, of course, raising the risk, but we have a lot of lowering the risk systems. We have a lot of functionality that has only a medium or low impact on patient and product and data integrity. We have a lot of functions that are not really affecting GXP functionality. That is all aspects that can lower the risk. On the other side, if we have limited test scripts, it raises the risk. If we can test more functions, effectively, this will lower the risk that we will have undetected errors in the system. So we should focus on functionality and not focus on the test script, as mentioned. It has to be meaningful testing. It has to be done by an experienced tester, of course. If the tester is not trained, then this will raise the risk also. And what is also important, you have to know your supplier. And that goes back to the 5 key concepts of GAMP. Your supplier can do a lot of work, but you have to assess that supplier. If the assessment proves that your supplier has good quality, this lowers the risk. On the other hand, if you've got real restrictions on time and budget, this might even raise the risk. So that just gives you an idea that there are many possibilities, many options that lower the risk to continue your work, your testing activities. Bart?
Yes, so to get your software or your features validated, you have to perform some testing activities. You can divide them into 2, the static techniques and the dynamic techniques. And static techniques are really focused on improving of the software, and it's performed without execution of your features or your software. So it's a review of your design and your code. You can also do a walkthrough, and it's something that is typically done during the development of the software. But today we will focus on the dynamic techniques, and there you want to find bugs or errors into your system. It's more accurate, so you won't find them and fix the issues you found. And here you also find the scripted and the unscripted testing, and that based on the risk of of your computer system. And this is where the CSA focus is at this moment. So we already set for the dynamic techniques. We have scripted and unscripted testing. So we will start with scripted testing. It's what we all know. Today, if we perform a validation, we use scripted testing. So it's a traditional validation we use to perform. We can divide it now in robust test scripting and limited test scripting. We all see for both, it's done for high risk and limited scripting for medium to high risk, but we can divide it. Robust scripted testing, high risk, will mean that is for a really customized application. So an application that is specially built for you, and there you can increase your testing by implementing positive, negative, boundary testing, alternate path testing. For limited script testing, you can reduce that amount or reduce the effort. For instance, by a positive scenario, and we are also, everything is linked to patient safety and product quality. And also keep in mind that data integrity and all those things is very important. So if we move here to the unscripted testing, we can that divide into three types of unscripted testing. We have, and the first, ad hoc testing, error guessing, and exploratory testing. If we talk about ad hoc testing, it's without planning or a predefined documentation, and it may occur in an informal test environment or in a well-defined environment or in a production environment. What's the difference? It is be used for low-risk features, and it can also be used to check your scripted testing upfront. So your scripted testing can be based on your ad hoc testing. How do you document this? You see here a screenshot. So you just document ad hoc testing was performed on a certain feature. If you have issues, you mention your issues. It doesn't matter if you have scripted or unscripted testings. If you have issues, deviations, you always have to document them. Here it's very short. You just say ad hoc testing, what you tested, which features you tested, you document your deviations, and you close it. And this is the way you have documented it. For error guessing, here you also depend on what your tester knows about the system, knows about which values he had to enter into your system to challenge your system, to see if you put faulty values into the system, to see how the system reacts. Does it prevent wrong answers? Does it warn you or things like that? So here you really need to know your system. If we go to exploratory testing, what's important here is that during your testing, also your knowledge increase, and it's very dynamically. You can build further on what you already tested and change your test strategy in the same way. How do you document this? Like is mentioned here. So you just make a list of all the things, the features you tested it, put on your use cases. So here you can define your approach, how you will do it, and the way you do it can change during your performance. So if you learn new things, you can implement them in your script in this case.
Yeah, you see here that during exploratory testing, you see a little bit more detail already in the documentation. It's not like scripted testing, of course, where you have much more detail required. So when do you apply any of these techniques? Well, in this scheme, I try, well, S2, the good practice guide says that the test rigor needed, of course, gets higher with a higher risk. within your risk priority. But it's a continuum. It's a continuum where the level of documentation needed gets higher, where the risk gets higher, but you have a lot of possibility, a lot of tastes where a high test rigor need or a high risk priority is not always requiring a lot of level of documentation. It depends on many factors, but you see it's a continuum. And you have to choose based on that risk priority. What is your test rigor needed and what is your level of documentation needed? And that's the idea, of course, of CSA. And that's what is presented in that good practice guide in Appendix S2. So I hope you get a lot of ideas about the possibilities that CSA is offering to have more options using techniques that are requiring a lower level of documentation when the risk priority is lower and also a lower test rigor need. I want to introduce you to a brainstorm session. I hope you get a lot of ideas that you want to share with us or together. And we know that this is a kind of an experiment, but we are going to try to divide the attendees in 3 groups. We have set up 3 whiteboards in Miro, and we requested you in the email we sent you to set up an account because that's the most easy way to access that whiteboard. We believe that you are our subject matter experts now because you had training during this webinar on CSA testing activities. And the question we are raising is, can we improve testing efficiency by applying critical thinking? Well, in my mind, 3 things came up. Of course, what are the risks with this approach? We want to know what you think the risks are. What are your positive remarks or advantages you see in this approach? And what are the disadvantages, or do you have any negative remarks? Please use colored notes in the Miro whiteboard to the colored sticky notes, yellow, green, and red, so we get a bit of an idea what kind of remark you are making. And I want to challenge you also to exercise critical thinking on the subject. Apply critical thinking on the subject of whether it's possible to improve testing efficiency. Well, I hope it is clear. We are going to divide the Teams meeting into 3 sessions. In the session, you get a link in the chat to your whiteboard. We have got 3 moderators. Of course, Bart will moderate 1 session, I will moderate a session, and Thierry Provençal will moderate the 3rd session. If you've got any questions, please ask them by putting on your microphone or put them in the chat, and start generating ideas in the brainstorm sessions. Okay, René, it's to you. I'm gonna stop this presentation at the moment. And can you start the 3 groups? Oh, one thing, we will take 20 minutes for the brainstorm session, and then we will see you all back in the GAMP webinar for a wrap up and continuing the webinar.
So René will set up the rooms. This will take a moment, please.